Hello, around 1 year ago I made my first video on this channel. It was Oopsie I Did It Again featuring Daniel Negreanu and his play during WSOP. Today we're going to look at his play from this year's series and see if his play in No Limit High Rollers got any better.
Let's just do them, okay? Let's just do them. Head over to the steam room. Talk a little No Limit Texas Hold'em. Okay, let's talk a couple hands. Now remember, we're deep stacked, 100 plus big blinds. Let's talk about the hand. The blinds are 6 and 12,000. Barack in the hijack makes it 25,000, which is basically a min raise, right? I'm on the button and I have 7-8 of spades. This is exactly kind of a dream spot. This is a powerhouse when you play deep in position. So I 3-bet to 75,000. The goal is to make the pot bigger with a hand that goes really well post-flop, right? Because it's a pretty easy hand to play on most cases, you know what I mean? You flop, don't flop anything, you're just done, whatever. Or, you c-bet, try to bluff. Because when I do that with those hands, and I also do it with the ace-king type hands, I can win on a lot of ace-high flops as well.
This is the early phase of 250k and Daniel decided to 3-bet his 8-7 suited from the button. Solver mixes actions with this hand and calls it more often than raises, but I like the 3-bet here, especially when overall he is on tighter side preflop, so he might get more credit. I'd like to see a little bit bigger sizing that deep, but it's not a disaster.
So it folds him, he calls. The flop is ace-10-6, and I don't have a backdoor flush draw. He checks. I go for 60k. No, I bet 50, sorry. I bet 50,000. Yeah, and he calls.
So far so good. This board is much better for the 3-betting player, as he should have all the best top pairs and top sets, and also a lot of his bluffs preflop come from aces, so he has both nut and equity advantage. The solver almost always uses this smaller sizing and is betting with almost 19% frequency, but to simplify our strategy we can just bet full range here.
And now the turn is the decision point. The turn is a 5, okay? So now we have the perfect bluff candidate because we have outs, we have a 9 or a 4.
Yes, Daniel, this is a perfect hand to bluff. Let's do it.
Anyway, I elect in this case to go with a different line. My line was going to be bet, check, bet. He checks, I check.
Come on, Daniel, I thought you had it. We can see that solver loves to overbet that turn and is doing it with 8-7 without clubs with 100% frequency. This is literally the best hand to bluff, as it doesn't block any Broadway hands that were called on the flop. He was worried that he would get check raised, but against this big sizing it's not a thing, as the solver is doing it with only around 1.5% of range, so being scared of that is irrational, and even when it happens he can just fold his 8 high. That's why 8-7 of clubs is checking back or betting with a smaller sizing, so it always realizes its equity. Our second hand takes place deeper in the day 2, with 22 players left while the top 10 is getting paid. Daniel opened the action with a raise from an early position with ace-3 suited. This is of course perfectly fine open. He is a chip leader at this table and he can raise with almost a quarter of his hands. Jeremy Osmus 3-bet him from the cutoff with ace-king off. This is an okay play, but we can see that when we're getting closer to the bubble, this hand isn't that great to 3-bet against someone who is covering us, as it's pretty grim scenario when we get a 4-bet when ICM is involved, and solver calls with it more often than raise.
I'm gonna do the Helmuth. All. I'm gonna say, I know he's light. Long. Just fold. I know he's light.
Daniel folded after this comment. This isn't a spot to go crazy, but it's a situation where he wants to 4-bet his kings, aces and ace-kings, and on top of that he can put very big pressure on smaller stacks, so he should have some bluffs, and we can see that suited aces are perfect for that and solver is going all in with them every time. I guess they get even better when you think that your opponent is 3-betting light, but he did it in Helmut style and managed to dodge a bullet here. Next hand took place shortly after, with 20 players remaining. Daniel raised from hijack with queen jack off and this is an okay open. Similar to the last hand, he can raise with around quarter of his hands and all Broadways are fine to do that. Biao Ding called his ace jack off from the big blind and this is also fine play. We can see that against a player from an early position who is covering him, he should just go all in only with ace-king off and raise smaller for value with aces, kings and ace-king suited. Ace-jack off is just too good to turn it into a bluff. On the 6-6-7 flop with 2 clubs, Biao checked and Daniel decided to check back his hand. We can see that this isn't a play with his holding, as the solver bets this flop 100% of the time. He can fold out some better hands and having both suits from the board is great in this scenario, as they block many hands that would want to continue. After queen of clubs on the turn, Ding checked again and Daniel followed suit. This isn't that bad as not c-betting, but we can see that the solver is betting all combos of queen jack off more often than not. When we look closer, we see that those with a club have the highest frequency of betting. The river was ace of hearts, and after the third check from Biao, Daniel checked for the final time. This is the only street where this makes a lot of sense, as he has nice showdown value and it's really hard now to get called by any worse hands.
I lost the absolute minimum.
There you go. Daniel and Jeff Platt.
Minimum.
One and the same.
Yeah, I had a club too.
He said that he lost the minimum, and this is true in this particular hand, but losing minimum shouldn't be our goal while playing poker, as we could say that while folding every single hand preflop. We should rather focus on winning the maximum. João Vieira, who took the 100k WSOP High Roller, check the last video if you haven't seen it already, has a facial expression that says it all. Next hand took place just a few hands later. This time João Vieira raised with king-queen suited from the cutoff. He is the shortest stack at this table, but this hand is of course perfectly fine to open. Negreanu called his queen 7 suited from the big blind, and this is also an okay play. When we look at his range, we see that he can go pretty crazy in this spot and rejam almost 20% of hands. Solver, for example, jams all combos of queen 9 and queen 8 suited, but queen 7 is a pure call, so well played here. On the monotone board, João c-bet for around a quarter of the pot. This is fine, but overall strategy on short stack on this flop is mostly to c-bet for 50% of the pot to play this as a 2-street hand. Because of how big his range advantage is, he can c-bet here almost 100% of the time. Daniel got a little bit too excited and check-raised his flopped flush. This isn't the best play, as the solver always slow plays this hand. SPR is just so low that it won't be a problem to get stacks in against hands that want to stack off on the flop. Solver is raising just a few percent of range, and calling here with made flushes protect his calling range, and also is great against hands that have 0% equity, like João now. Imagine that Daniel calls and the turn comes king or queen, he would get his stack in the process. By raising, he made Vieira fold a hand that he couldn't possibly win. The last hand today is also the last hand Daniel played in this tournament. We're already in the money, and this is the unofficial final table with 9 players remaining. Action starts with a raise from Alex Foxen in under the gun +1 and ace-king offsuit. This is of course standard open, and he should raise with around 15% of hands. I want to also show you the GPV variant of this scenario, and we can see that this is basically the same range, and the difference is just 0.3%. There are very small adjustments, as with the ICM blockers are a little bit more important, so solver prefers to open more ace-x hands instead of some suited connectors. When you're in the early position on a full ring table, it's almost impossible to make any big adjustments. Even if he thinks that Daniel will overfold his big blind by a few percent of hands, there are still 7 other players on the way, so this is the spot to stick to solid GTO ranges. Negreanu found ace-9 off on the big blind, and after counting his stack and using a time bank, decided that it's time to go all in. This isn't a total disaster, as he is the shortest stack, but we can clearly see that solver never raises with this hand, and its jamming range starts with an ace-10. When we compare this ICM range, where he should rejam only around 9% of hands with GPV ranges, there is almost no difference in what hands we should re-raise. There is just a huge difference in calling range, as in ICM solver wants to fold half of his hands, and in GPV there is less than 20% of folding. Daniel didn't see a single mistake while playing this tournament, and even the day after he answered a few comments on his vlog that this was a punt, and gave a speech about why this was a good play.
Yeah, so last night, you know, I read some of the comments, and some of you guys didn't like the ace-9 play, and I understand why, but I think you're missing a few things first of all.
This was a $250,000 buy-in tournament, and what struck me the most is that he'd rather elaborate on what he thinks instead of just checking the hand in some ICM software to verify his play. And these spots on a few big blinds are very precise, and there is almost no room for adjustments. It's not like he had a read that someone ate the cookie. The idea of this video isn't to bash on Daniel, as he is a great player, but I just want to give you advice to always be critical of your play, because it's the only way to improve your game. If you think that you're flawless and rather justify your mistakes instead of putting in some work, then you will never become a better player, and there is always a room to improve. Thank you for watching, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, and see you next time. Bye.